Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Improv Network podcast. This is a series of conversations about improv aimed at making stronger connections throughout the improv community. I'm James Quesada.
And I'm Bob Wick.
And before we jump into our conversation for the episode, Bob and I just wanted to share some sad news with from our community in Michigan. Our good friend Tori Tamalia passed away earlier this week, and she's a wonderful human being that started with her husband Jason Pointless Improv Theater in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and she was just one of the best people I've ever met, and I can't say enough great things about her and what she meant to the community, and Bob and I being part of starting up that theater, getting a chance to work with her was just an amazing.
What a great experience. Yeah. I was talking to Jason earlier this week, and I was thinking back, like when we used to do auditions for Pointless, it would always be me, you, Gary, Jason, and her together. And it used to crack me up how her and Gary would have who's the most organized offs in a way, like with the folders and everything. Like, and for a guy who's not organized at all, I was just always in awe of how she just had her shit together all the time. I don't understand how people can do that kind of stuff. So it's like almost like a superpower, and I was always so impressed by that.
Yeah, and also on her list of superpowers was just an incredibly positive outlook, positive attitude all the time. Even when I was telling Jason that one of my fondest memories of her, again, in kind of starting up the theater, was when things were like stressful or hectic. She always had the best attitude of anyone, and so we should mention that she passed away from cancer, and a special brand of aggressive, nasty cancer. And it obviously, like with anybody dealing with cancer, is so much to deal with. And when we're working with her, you kind of that loses its presence on the front of your mind, and we start like complaining or bitching about this and that, and she would still always have the most positive attitude, and I swear,
overall had the most to deal with. Yeah,
exactly. And there would be moments when I would be like complaining about something or being like, yeah, well, I don't know, and she would just give me this look of like.
Really?
Like you think you have a lot to deal with. I
had to drive out here. I'm so tired. Oh, you're tired?
Oh, yeah.
You might hear about my week?
Yeah.
I can't. Nope.
What can I do for you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so we wanted to just share our memory and thoughts on her, and also just put out there that there is a GoFundMe for her family. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about her and her story, which includes, a diagnosis of cancer. And she was given like a pretty short time period to live. And she fought through that with the support of her husband and her friends and family. And I just remember, so we started Pointless in 2015 is when it opened, and we were everyone was just kind of like rooting for Tori to make it in time long enough to see the theater launch and get to take part in the reality of their long-standing dream, Tori and Jason, of opening up this theater. And it opened, and we were all so happy to celebrate that. And then she made another 6 years of life out of her battle with cancer. And, it's just incredible that she fought that long. And you know, it's always a tragedy, but I'm just so glad that she had that much longer than she was given.
And then we got to know her. Yeah.
So cheers to Tori. And there's the GoFundMe link that we'll throw in the comments if anybody would like to support and check out her story and her family. We also have her obituary page here, which gives a little bit more detail on her as well. Their GoFundMe campaign actually reached their goal, which is incredible. That's fantastic. And, there's always more to give. And if you're interested in other places to give, the special nasty brand of cancer that Tori had was called ROS1. And there's a group and a fund called the ROS Wonders that goes specifically toward research and battling against that brand of cancer. So you can check out that page too in the links, link in comments, and just check out the survivors of the and fighters, the Wonders as they call them, the ROS Wonders.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Really, really fond memories of Tori, and much love out to the Pointless community. That brings us to a radical shift into improv talk. And we're very excited to have a guest with us to talk about the evolution of a script. This is our good friend from Portland, Oregon. It is Luke Zwanziger.
Yeah.
Hey, Luke.
Hey.
You got to follow the cancer talk.
Yep. No pressure, buddy.
All right, so we're talking about my drama scripts, obviously, my dark historical thrillers. Thanks for having me today,
the
guys.
things that really matter, yeah.
How you been, bud?
Good. All things considered, doing pretty good.
Yeah, that is always the caveat, right? All things considered.
Yeah.
But we're really happy to have you on to talk about script writing. I think that it's, especially now during the pandemic, when live theater is not an option, and virtual improv just for not everybody gets the same itch scratched. A lot of people are turning to other forms of keeping that creative productivity, and writing is definitely one of them. And I know that you have said that, it's crazy to even talk about it, on an improv podcast because of how long it's been, and that most of your time has been spent writing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to you about it. What are you working on right now? What have you been writing, spending much of your time on?
Man, since the Panini hit last year, I wrote 3 TV pilots that had just been building up inside of me, and I'm working on a feature right now.
Wow.
I love narrative storytelling, and like I came to improv a long time ago, but like went through the cycles and like wrote my first screenplay 2007.
So you found improv first?
2004 is when I started improvising.
Gotcha.
And that was an accident. That's a whole nother story. Like my friend's like, hey, I'm auditioning for a thing called Improv. You should come watch and support me. And I went, and they're like, you can't watch an audition. That's weird. I don't know if I can swear.
Go for it.
Okay, that's fucking weird. And that's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll join in these improv games. And I ended up getting cast on the team, and my friend did not.
Oh wow.
And that's why you don't invite people to watch your auditions.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So do not look for support from friends. They will stab you in the back.
Right. Or find less talented friends to invite until you look better.
So I started improv way long ago, and then took a screenwriting class in college, and that script has been lost to the sands of time. Thank God.
Okay.
Part
of me wants to talk about like just I don't know, because we're talking. So the header here is the evolution of a script, and so one of the most interesting things to look at is the scripts that you have had the longest, whether it's your first script or just like that you have gone through the most drafts on or been sitting on and actively like stewing about for the most time. Yeah, but I don't know. Like I'll leave it to you. You want to start by talking about that?
There's so many ways. I mean, yeah, we can jump right in. We can talk about my history, but we can jump in. I really started taking screenwriting, quote unquote, seriously. Last economic crisis in 2008, I was a college professor and I lost my job and couldn't get a job for a while. I was like, what do I really want to be doing? And I was like, I want to be making art, telling creative stories. At that time, I started improvising in garages and barns with friends. And I was like, oh yeah, this is super fun. And I started writing scripts again. And I wrote historical dramas. Like I came as a history teacher and I was like, there's so many untold stories that are amazing. I'm going to write some scripts. I had some early successes. They're great. And then like I had like a big punch in the gut. Like I put a script up on the blacklist. If you don't know what the blacklist is, it's a script.
I don't, so please explain.
Great. Oh, yeah.
I do. No.
Ooh, Bob is in the know.
I heard the podcast. I'm familiar.
I don't know when it started. Like, I don't know, 10 years ago, longer. It was like just industry scripts that were circulated of like things that didn't get produced. And they're like, oh, this is super cool. A lot of things that didn't get produced ended up getting produced. And then they started opening it up to writers and being like, look, host your script. We'll give you feedback notes. And you also kind of get like ranked in the list. And like your script could get discovered. So it was a great way of opening doors to screenwriters living anywhere. I was living in rural Eastern Oregon in a small town of 2,000 people. And I was like, well, this is a way for me to put my script out there. And it tanked bad.
Oh boy. No.
I was like, I worked on it. I was like, oh man. And then like it got a bad review. And like that crippled my screenwriting for a little bit. Like I was just like, oh, like I had some good successes. Like I'd semi-finaled in a couple things. I pitched to ATX. But like that one review, like just like hit me in the gut. And I was like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't be writing.
Well, can I ask you, what about the review hit you so hard? Was it like a truth that hit you, or is it just like someone critiquing you in general?
No, I mean, it was about the script. It wasn't about me. And like a lot of the notes on the blacklist are kind of outward facing. So they're not necessarily constructive for the writer. They are intended for studio executives. Like, hey, I read this script. Here's what its market potential is. Here's its flaws. It's got like good characters, good plot, good bones. This could last for 5 years. All the things a business person wants to know about the story you're telling. Because at the end of the day, capitalism, is making our art happen out of Hollywood. And like we can get into like that in the writing process as well. But like the notes were right. Like I look at them now and I'm like, oh yeah, yep, that's real true. And I don't think the story does not have merit. I think the story really does have merit. And I've started returning to that script. It was too painful for me at the time. Like I was like, I didn't have thick skin. Not that I have thick skin, and nor do I like the whole concept of thick skin. We can get into that.
That's another podcast. So we'll have you back for that though.
Skin podcast. Yeah.
Like people are like, you just gotta toughen up. And like, there's an aspect of that. But I think there is like a macho culture that kind of comes from that as well, that I think is unhealthy, and we can get into receiving notes. But yeah, so I have a script that like really anchored me and still continues to anchor me, because I was like, this story is really interesting. It was about the American Dust Bowl. We were in a recession. I was like, the American Dust Bowl is something that like usually gets skimmed over in history books. We talk about the Great Depression. We talk about like the economy, but like this is a 10-year of like ecological disaster. We had snow turning brown, raining in England from like just giant black blizzards that were basically dust blowing off the land, like metric tons of earth blowing off. So it's an ecological disaster and it's an economic disaster. And we think of like the Grapes of Wrath. I'm basically pitching you my story now. But like we think about the Grapes of Wrath, and like we talk about the people who leave. 40 to 50% of the population remains. And I'm like, what is it about people that like are tenacious and like hang on when you could move, you could leave? And this is about like my branding of story and like me realizing what kind of stories I tell. But like I grew up in small towns, and I'm like, these people complain, not everyone, but some people complain about being in a small town. I'm like, you could just leave. Like we live, at least in America, where you have some sort of mobility. But that again is like the myth of the American dream of like you can leave. I don't know if everyone actually can. Ultimately. And like, so this was a story that I wanted to tell using history that also is resonating with the time in 2008. I don't know if people really know what it's like now to be in an economic disaster and like have no mobility or like any sort of like net underneath them. So I don't think this story could be told anymore because people just don't
people just don't get it these days.
They don't
like
get
suddenly
it.
have the economy choke.
or being stuck in the same place and not be able to leave. I don't think
everything around them is killing their friends and family. So storytelling. Just storytelling, and like that story still anchors me. And like, why did I want to tell that story? And I've moved on and written a lot of other scripts. But that story still anchors me. And like, especially with these times like happening again, I'm like, I need to revisit that script. That script still, it got like, I forget, like a 2 out of 10. It was not good.
Wow.
Let me ask you real quick, just because I love the sound of the story, and hopefully people have like a great idea. If they go to write a script, they're like, I believe in this idea. I love it. I'm like obsessive about it. And then you go to write it, and in terms of like getting the feedback and having the aspiration to finish your first script and believing in the story, like I have found that one of the biggest like crippling factors for early writers, myself included, is that like when you go to write the first script, you take so much pride in it, and you're doing it alone, so you don't get a ton of feedback. And there's something between like, I don't know if it's like perfectionism or ego or both or whatever, but like I've taken now to just like really offer the advice to early anything, people who are producing like sketch videos, a podcast, a script, is that like you no matter where you're starting at, no matter what your idea is, you have so far to go, and you probably don't know that and how. Like
that's like a really good point. If your first attempt at something is perfect, congratulations. You're that's rare and few and far between.
And you want it to be, you're like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I better be good at it. And what you said about like how crippling it was to get the bad feedback, like how do you kind of reconcile, like what made you bounce back to keep working on it after that? And like, what have you learned up till this point about like what the like learning curve is on becoming a good writer?
Yeah. And that's so huge. And I think to walk that back just like one step, I think one of the big myths we're told about writers is this like myth of like the solitary writer of like who goes out into the cabin in the woods and like just writes a novel and comes out and like, here is my manuscript and it's perfect. And I think that myth of the solitary writer like needs to be killed. I mean, it's so romantic, and it is so untrue of how basically anything happens. Like, I mean, maybe at this point, Stephen King doesn't have many people giving him feedback on his thing, but like most writers, you look at the acknowledgments in their book, they're in writers groups, they're taking chapters to their groups and getting feedback and writing and rewriting and like iterating. Like even like Andy Weir's The Martian, like he would put that up on a blog, get feedback, rewrite the chapter after putting it out into the internet. Like, wow. It's just the iterative process is something that like people don't get to see in it. And like we hear about it, we're like, oh yeah, Aaron Sorkin, he wrote 20 drafts of a movie. And like he's kind of like, people consider him successful, you know? And so like how brazen and like egotistical is it of me to think that like, oh, I can do it in less than 20. You should at least have 20. Right? And like I think holding things with an open hand. I was in a small town when I was writing these things, and I didn't have writers groups around me, and I didn't have creatives around me that like we were investing in each other. And I think that's something that has been huge in my journey as a writer. Improv has been huge in that collaboration of working together and iterating, and even being able to take notes, just being like, okay, cool, I can do better, I can be better. But like, we do pour so much of ourselves into our script, and like, where improv's ephemeral, like, you know, some of us tape our shows and sometimes we'll watch them back as game tape, but most of the time, like, we've created something in the moment, we're proud of that creation, and then it's gone. But we're putting days, weeks of work into these scripts, and so it can become more personal, like, what, how is this wrong, how is this not resonating? And so I think learning to have that ephemeral nature of like, oh, I'm just creating, reiterating, and to some people this process, like a lot of improvisers get to do this, but not all improvisers get to do this, as we're working the scripts, but just realizing what you've created and realizing that it is not written in stone. Like, so often we treat like, well, that's my first thought, that's good.
yeah No, that's just a warm-up. I love what you're saying, because I think people don't, well, just some of the students I've worked with don't realize how much work it actually takes. They think, hey, my job is just to get it on paper and then step back and let it happen. And that's so far from true. It's kind of sad. But I do think you got to get on paper initially, and just take down all the roadblocks, because I think second guessing, tweaking, just getting that first draft onto the page is the most important thing for your first step, or even a half step. And then it's time to go over the whole thing, because there's so many reasons you can stop yourself from finishing a script. And most of them are crap. So just get it on the page, and then do all the extra stuff like you're talking about, like show it to a friend, people you trust. Take notes as if like the same kind of notes you would take as an improviser when you're rehearsing, like, and receive the notes in the same manner.
Sort of on that train of thought, I'm just thinking about how, like, with improv, one of the things that you like sort of benefit from in the creative sense is just that, like, okay, well, whatever you establish, you have to work with, right? That's it's out there, is established, and now you got to do something with it. And that would probably be beneficial to apply to writing, where it's just like, get your first draft out there, and even if it's not exactly what you wanted it to be, it is what it is now, and work with it like you have to work with it. But on the other hand, with writing, you kind of like, you know, like you were describing your story, Luke, is you have a particular vision and something that you want to accomplish specifically. So, like, how much when you go to like an outline or a first draft, or like rewrite, how much you kind of like bending things back to your original intention, and how much do your scripts tend to like evolve in a different direction that you wouldn't have thought of at the outset?
That's huge. And like, this has been the journey. Let's talk about one of my pilots I've been writing for the past year. It started out as a sketch that just had too much meat on it. I kept like being like, oh, this is like a 10-page sketch, and it's like this whole like, and I was like, oh, it's like a 2-page that like turned to 5, that turned to 10, and I was like, this is like, this needs to be a show. And it's a vampire hospital show called Vampire.
I saw that on your website. That beautiful name. It's amazing.
And that just started out as like a dumb sketch of like vampires having like a Sunday, the way that like we have snow days because you can't go outside. Like, vampires have a Sunday, and so they can't go outside because they'll get burned by the sun.
It's too sunny.
Too sunny. We're gonna have a Sunday. Everyone stay inside, bundle up. But of course, then someone gets sunburned. I'm like, well, where does a vampire go for a hospital? Well, we're gonna have a vampire hospital. And so I was like, but there's more there. Like, well, who's in the hospital? Like, and so like this grew into a pilot script. And so I was like, okay, cool.
I kind of love that, because by nature, like, the whole myth of the vampire is they don't care for human life, but they care for each other's lives. itself is interesting to me. Like,
I mean,
we got to save
lives,
this guy.
dude. They're undead. They're lives.
But they
Saving
can
lives.
disappear. I mean,
Yeah, I mean they have to tourniquet an arm as it's turning to ash, like that's been sun exposed, sort of thing. You know, like instead of having a blood transfusion, we're like taking blood out of their veins. You know, because they don't have running blood. Like they're hydrophobic. All of these different things. Like I was like, oh, it's a doctor show, but with vampires. And I was like, well, let's add other monsters like werewolves and Frankensteins, and like so I got now there's like a demon administrator, and so this was kind of like yes-anding the basic premise of like, okay, yes, there's a hospital for monsters. What else is there? And so when I built the pilot, like that's what it was. That original sketch no longer exists in the current draft of my script. Like everything that happened in that original draft is basically gone. I think there is still a character that wears like a Bela Lugosi, like old school vampire, like red cape sort of thing. And that's about it. Like, there's not much left of the original sketch.
That's
wow. Yeah, so that's interesting too. Like, just again, and you started it as a sketch. I think that's a pretty straightforward or organic example of like, okay, well, it evolved on its own, and it just seemed like oh, there was something that just kept wanting to come out, and it told you what shape it was going to take. Yeah. But like not everything ends up being that straightforward, right? Sometimes you're like, I have this idea for like the Dust Bowl thing, and you're like, well, is that a series? Is that a movie? Is that a short? You know, like how do you kind of figure out like what medium you're writing for, and how often does that change as you're writing?
Oh man, that's a great question. I kind of on some levels let the story tell me, but also I'll come into a thing and like know what medium it is. And like I know people who've changed their pilot scripts into features and vice versa. And like you're really trying to say like how much story is here? Like is it story or character, or like what is the important thing? Like movies, yes, everything needs to be character driven, but movie is a complete story. Where like shows need to have, they talk about engine, but basically like what can happen week to week consistently, and that can be interpersonal like conflict. Like, do I want to see these characters for hours, or do I just want to see a story that they live in? And that will really help you kind of be like feature or long form narrative.
I guess you can. It's also like if you have a bunch of pilots or spec scripts, and you're like, I haven't written a feature. There's also that, right? Where you're like, I'm just going to make something into a feature, and I'll make it fit. Like,
yeah, well, and like that's a writing exercise for yourself too. Like sometimes if you're stuck on a script, like maybe you're working it in the wrong medium. Try just be like, okay, this isn't hitting as a half-hour pilot. What if it was an hour-long pilot? Or what if it was a movie? What if it's a web series? Like, what if you chop it down to shorter chunks? Be like, I don't know, let's see what 5-minute episodes do on this. Like, maybe I don't have enough engine to sustain. Like, maybe I just want to be quick and punchy. And like, that's what your jam is. And I know a lot of improvisers like that quick and punchy.
Because they're doing a lot of stuff on like, not Twitter, Twitch,
TikTok.
Not Twitch, TikTok. Thank you. I knew it's man. That was an old man
Twitch
moment
talk.
if I ever had one in my life. Yeah, doing a lot of stuff on MySpace that's going really quick, kids.
Look, Quibi is going to take over the media landscape.
Wait, is it? Listen, I would love to talk about what is Quibi because like the idea of these like
what was Quibi?
What was
is it gone
Quibi?
already?
Oh, it's dead.
Yeah.
Wow, I hate to laugh, but I mean, I was kind of rooting for it because there's
me too.
There was some really cool content that they had on there.
Oh, that's such a bummer that it came and went so quickly because it's like I'm always rooting for that the pendulum will swing back to like longer and longer content now that we've gone so freaking short. Right. I would love to see things push back, which I guess in some ways they have. Like television series are very popular now, but it's just that's unfortunate.
Well,
R.I.P. Quibi.
Well, to just do I'm sure there's many podcasts on it, but like it launched like April of last year, like in the heart of the pandemic, where people had loads of time.
Yeah.
And so binging 10-minute episodes no longer like, oh, I've got nothing to do.
Yeah, it was supposed to be something you watched like on the train or something on the way to work, and no one was going to work. So
bite-sized episodes, like
But then why we don't have to stick on this train of thought too long, but then why is Instagram stories and TikToks still so popular at that short 1 minute mark? Like, what's the deal with that?
I mean, I think it comes to a little bit of like human connection, like highly produced content. We want to settle in, we want to watch it. But like with like TikToks and Reels, like we're engaging with other humans in a more naturalistic way. And like that is something that's been lacking in our lives. And so like
there's a bit of voyeurism in it too. Like you get to see, inside someone else's life or whatever they were presenting to you. Right. Yeah. Rather than, like you said, highly produced content. And we are conditioned to read or watch different mediums in different ways. That's why they're the big studios are so anti like putting their good stuff on like the streaming yet before they put it in the movie theaters. Which, as we learned, it doesn't really matter, but there is a way you watch different things on different mediums that affect the way we interpret the story or whether or not we like the content we're receiving. So yeah, I think it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's all that short form. There's like the YouTube web series. There's, there's anthologies and limited series and radio dramas. And then of course your standard 30-minute, 60-minute television and your features and everything. And it's like, it's never been more overwhelming to try to figure out which medium you want to write for. If you don't already have like a clear parameter or an end goal that, if you're just writing for yourself, or not writing for yourself, but like if you're just writing without being like, oh, I want to be in film or, it's easier if you're like, I want to write for TV. Well, then write a TV episode. But if you're just like, I want to write and I don't know exactly where I want to end up yet, then it becomes very difficult to figure out like what your next idea is going to be written for.
Yeah. Well, and like, especially if you're early on in your writing career, and like, I say this like as if I'm like so advanced. I'm not. But like, there's just an aspect of like finding your voice. Just write whatever you want to, like, and like in that process, you'll find something. And like, if you want to write TV, write as many TV episodes as you can. Like I started out like writing specs, like that was the way, and like specs being speculative scripts that like are of other shows. Like I wrote my first Office spec in like 2008, and like applied to the NBC. Like there's so many contests out there and like fellowships that like are trying to get new writers a leg up, and just write for those things and put them out there and see what you can do on that. But you're finding your voice, like both finding other people's voice, being able to write in like, I love The Office, I'm going to write an episode of that, just understanding structure and characters. But then as you write your own work, which is also considered spec, but you're doing it on spec because you're not being paid. But in the TV world, spec scripts are other people's stuff. And then you have your own original pilots that you're writing.
So let me ask you that. Oh, sorry. Please continue.
Oh, I was just going to say that. And then like feature films, like writing a spec feature is an original feature. So
what would your advice be to someone who's trying to find their voice and the right medium and everything? Just getting organized in the beginning. Would you suggest writing smaller? Would you focus more on character work or premise? Do you recommend doing any stuff like writing out the beats first and then writing a script, or is that something you discover along the way? What your process is? So basically, overgeneralize. How do you suggest that one discovers their process? And should they focus on either character work or premise?
I definitely would say like character work is huge. Like work on your characters, like write 1-page scripts, like give yourself easy things to accomplish, like write a 1-pager, like just focus on like writing a dinner scene. You're like, I'm going to write a dinner scene. If you have a story you want to tell, great, you're miles ahead. But if you just want to start experimenting, like just give yourself easy things to accomplish, because like writing a feature or even like a pilot can become daunting and like can discourage you. But experiment with things. Like this is something like no one script has come together the same way for me. It just
cool. Yeah.
hasn't. Like, you know, the Vamp ER, that was a sketch to web series to pilot. And like I have a web series version of it and I have a pilot version of it. I have another one about sibling rivalry called Alpha and Omega that started out as like a character thing. So it's like, oh, siblings, they're at odds with each other. One's a funeral director, one's a midwife. You know, it's a sitcom, you know. And so like that basically went straight to pilot. Didn't even have an outline of that. Like I just went straight to pilot. Now, have I had to do lots of rewrites on that? Yes. Is it finished? No. I just did I basically did a page 1 rewrite of that last month. And so page 1 rewrite is when you just throw away everything and start on a blank page. Wow. And so this is where like really focusing on character will help you immensely, because if you're focused on plot points, like they go to the doctor and then they meet this and then the wacky person comes in, that doesn't give you a real good understanding of like what your characters are doing. But if you know who your characters are, you could start with a blank page and tell a brand new story with those characters. And like maybe you'll find something that hits. Like, and so for my process on that one, like I wrote the script, rewrote it a couple times, punched up jokes, and it basically wasn't hitting. And the reason it wasn't hitting, and the reason I know, is I sent it to friends. I took a couple classes, and they're like, look, your script's very funny. The number of jokes you have is admirable. And I was like, oh, I'm putting that in my pocket. Thank you.
And I'll stop listening now. Thank you.
End scene. All right.
And they're like, but we don't know who the main character is. They're like, they just go and do their jobs in funny ways, but we have no reason to care about them. And I was like, oh yeah, why do we care? What is their struggle? What's their internal goals and desires? And there's so many different tools you can have to find those. And like as improvisers, we have a lot of those tools to like find voices for people. I was like, oh yeah, I want this to be about the midwife sister coming into her family who wants her to join the family business. And she's like, nope. So now we have like a conflict, and we have wants, desires, goals. That like she wants to be like viewed as competent, but she can't because her family wants to join the family business, which she won't. So of comedy, of course, like you give people goals and desires that they can't ever get. Like Michael Scott in The American Office wants to be everyone's best friend, but by nature of being the boss, he can never be everyone's best friend. Like he has like his wants and desires are at odds with each other. But he always wants it, but can never get it. And that's where a lot of comedy comes in. So if you can find those wants and then set up a situation where they just can't get it, you're going to end up with a lot more comedy. And I also ran into this with my vampire script. A lot of jokes, but like there was no like wants, goals, desired needs of these vampires. Like they want to do their job good, but no one wants to see a show where people are like, I want to do my job good. That's...
everybody cares. Everybody cares at the vampire hospital.
So I introduced a character.
So would you suggest doing like character bios? Is that something you do personally, or?
I've done character bios. I haven't done them from all my scripts. I probably should. It usually helps.
It's work, man.
It's a lot of work. You know, write in their voice. Like if you want to write a diary, like in the voice of the character, like you'll discover things. Another thing I do that's been a very helpful tool is using the Enneagram personality types. If I can personality type my characters, like the Enneagram literally will tell you, like, you know, however you feel about personality types, Enneagrams will say, when this person is functioning well, they'll interact this way. When they're interacting poorly, like in a period of stress, this is the ways they act out. And so you're like, oh, if my character is this, I put them in this situation, this is the way they'll act out. And a lot of times I'll work backwards and be like, oh, I've written this script. They're put in this situation. They react this way. They're probably this. And that will help inform other ways to write the character.
And what exactly is an Enneagram?
Yeah, great. Enneagram is a personality type.
Thanks, James.
Yeah. I love it. I love
was
it.
about to ask that too. Like, am I the only one here that doesn't?
Yes, right. The Enneagram. Yes.
Yes. Yes, Enneagrams.
Yes, of course.
From Dr. Graham.
It's personality typing. Like, there's the Myers-Briggs, INFJ, all those things. Help you know those. The Enneagram is like this wheel of like how people interact with the world, and you kind of like you self pick your thing. Like, my internal goals is like I want to be viewed as competent, and like that internal desire means that I often interact in the world in which like I value like friendships, I value like professional advancement, I value these things. There are other people who those things are not valuable to them. And so like if you can figure out like this personality diagram shows you how people value things, and like what they want and how they interact when they can't get them either. And so it's super helpful both to know yourself. I mean, it's been very helpful for me to be like, why am I angry about this situation?
Right.
It's because I value this. And I think it's just good self-work. But if you can place that self-work into your characters and be like, oh, they're a type 9. Type 9s are like peacemakers. They avoid conflict at all costs. They will not engage, and like, oh, a type 8, they are all about conflict, but for justice. Like, they will call you on your bullshit, but they're about justice. And like, it's super great if they're working in a positive way, but if they're in a negative way, oh boy, they'll start, attacking you personality and like all of these things. So like knowing when your character is healthy and when they are unhealthy helps you know how to take your script maybe to the next level. If you're like, what would my character do if this happens to them? This helps like ground it in a little bit more realism. I follow an Instagram account called Enneagram and Coffee. So if anyone out there wants to learn about Enneagrams, it's a fun way to like break down Enneagrams and learn about yourself and the people around you.
Yeah, I'm curious. Was that originally a writing tool or character development tool, or is it like a psychological or therapy type thing?
It was developed hundreds of years ago by monks.
Really?
Yeah,
man, I've never heard of this.
Me neither.
I'm definitely gonna check it out.
Yeah,
monks,
definitely.
You say
monks? Yeah. I'm not sure I can't remember which diaspora of monks, but yeah, it was a kind of a religious tool for pastors to help understand themselves as well as the people around them as they interacted and tried to help people essentially, and be like,
yeah, that's amazing. To me, it sounds like a writing tool. I can't imagine. I don't know how it's spelled, but it sounds like an Enneagram would be like. It's a graph for how your character will act in any situation. It's an Enneagram.
Yeah.
You need a gram? I got one for any occasion.
Yeah. Right. But okay, so yeah, that's a fantastic tool. What are some other like ways that you hit writer's block, or what sort of things like prompt you to do a page one rewrite, or like stop and be like, is my character working or not? Like, where do you find yourself getting writer's block? And like what are some other ways that you push past it?
Yeah. The biggest thing, and this is a luxury that you have when you're writing for yourself, but it's time and giving yourself permission to put a script in a drawer, figuratively, come back to it in a month, 2 weeks. Like sometimes you'll be able to see things later. And I put a ton of stress on myself. Like, this is something that causes me anxiety of like, I've just got to get it done. I'm gonna write 5 pages today. And like, sometimes that will happen and sometimes it won't. And like, giving yourself space. And some people are great at this, and maybe those people need to be told to go write more. But like for me, I need to be told, step away for a minute, son. Like, just let it be. It will. And like when I give myself the space to go sit on my back porch and read a book, for a day or something, and like maybe not even write for a day. I usually come back refreshed with fresh eyes. You don't always have that luxury. I've been working under deadlines before. Last year I had the great opportunity to work in a Zoom writers room.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
And so like that was like working on deadlines. Like we've got to get these scripts done. We're shooting like, it was all COVID safe stuff. Like the actors filmed themselves. Like it was a wild project. I don't know, when it first came about, we were like, oh, the pandemic will be like over in 3 months. We got to get this done.
Yeah.
And that wasn't me. That was the director. The director's like, hey, we got to get this done while it's still relevant. And I was like, I think this is gonna drag on. Anyways,
Sure.
The series is still not out, and I'm at this point. I'm like, I don't know if anyone wants to watch this show. Let's put it in a drawer and like pull this show out in 5 years. This will be a nice slice as a dark comedy. But at that point, I'm working on deadlines, and so then I have to implement other skills. Okay, how do I get this script to where it needs to be? But fortunately, at that point, I'm working with other writers. They have notes and being like, this script needs X done to it. Like, we don't understand motivation. We don't have like a strong cliffhanger. We don't have a strong character change. Like, you start just asking questions. Like, if you can ask questions and then try to answer those questions, will really help you with rewrites. Oftentimes when I'm rewriting as well, I'll go through and do like a character pass. Like, I'll go through and be like, does this make sense for my main character? Just look at every interaction my main character is doing.
Right.
Is this their voice? Is this what they want? Is it clear? Once I've done that, I'll go through and be like, how's their sidekick? And just go through and like pick one person or one thing to really focus on is very helpful to maybe like overcome those writer blocks.
What would you say, like, once you have a story arc, going back and changing the dialogue and the interaction, the relationship stuff would be a little bit easier, or?
No. Because on some levels, I think you need to focus on character first. Like, the plot points are great, but if the character motivations aren't there, then your plot's gonna change.
That's a good point.
Like, if you're like, well, why are they making this decision? Is it for plot convenience? Do they just need to end up at the pool? Well, it's forced. There's no real reason they need to end up there aside from the fact that I wanted to have a pool party scene. And like, it just feels false. And like, you can overthink these things a lot, but that's also part of the job is to overthink the things and ask the questions before other people do.
You can always feel that when they do force that stuff into script. Like a lot of CW shows, which I've been watching a lot of because I share a TV with someone who loves that channel. Be like, oh, you always said swimming calms you down. Better go to the pool. Like, you've never said that during like I watched all 3 previous episodes. They never mentioned a pool once. Okay, I guess we're going to the pool now.
Or you end up like 5 seasons in, and they're like, "You love the pool, man." Like, what?
Yeah. Oh man. So I'm distracted now because there's an episode of Julia and I have been watching a ton of the Gilmore Girls, and there's an episode where it was just like, why are they doing this? Because they said they would. Like, I wish I could come up with the exact episode, but when you have, I suppose what you're kind of saying here, Luke, is that like it's good to be able to work in a writer's room and to collaborate. And, like you said earlier, that myth of the solo writer just isn't really what it is. But what you can do when you're working alone is kind of bring back the sort of feedback and collaboration that you've experienced in between, and give that voice to yourself and try to become like an outside observer, in some other compartment of your head while you're reading through your script. Which I think is great. I think that's a really great tip for like solo writers is just like try to remember the types of things that you get criticism on, so you can ask the same questions before someone else does. That's a really great piece of advice.
And if you don't have that community, you're not getting those questions. And like being part of writers' rooms and writers' groups has grown my craft leaps and bounds. Like, and like part of it is like I am like, I took all the energy I was putting into improv and like pivoted it into screenwriting, but like the ability to just engage versus like, you know, writing in the woods. Like I didn't know the questions I needed to be asking about my characters. And I think like, you know, that's maybe why that blacklist criticism like really hit me hard. I was like, I don't know as much as I thought. I thought I could just tell a story and it would be done. And like, oh man, you know, like you're going through so many revisions. And then by the time you get it good enough to catch the attention of someone, they're going to make you change it as well. You know, like you're going to go through rounds of studio notes or actor notes, or they'll cast someone else. You're like, oh, I don't like this character. Can you rewrite that and change the motivations? And you're just like, okay, well, I guess you're paying me now, so I've got to change this. You know, and like that was an interesting thing working in a writer's room. I was writing on scripts that like I was given characters where I'm like, I don't like this character. I don't like what the director wants done with them, but I still had to write something that was meaningful, powerful, and like engaging that met the needs of the director, but somehow be true to my own voice. And that was a whole nother unique challenge that you'll get into. And I think what you need to be asking also, like as you're writing, like, yes, you're finding your voice, and back to like, should I write a web series? Should I write a pilot? Should I write a feature? Like, what are you wanting to accomplish with your writing? Like, is it a creative exercise? Awesome. I personally want my work to be seen by people. Like there is some like personal satisfaction you get from like writing, but like ultimately art should be shown. So like, why are you doing it? Are you gonna direct this and like have your improv troupe star in it, your sketch troupe? You're gonna go get actors locally? Are you going to direct this? Are you trying to sell it? Are you trying to get staffed? All of these questions, you know, like will help drive how you're writing and like what your expectations are on it. You know, and so
let me ask, we're coming close to the end of our time here, unfortunately, but
oh man,
I know it's flown by.
I know.
But I'm curious, related to this idea of like, what you're writing or having goals for it. Let's say like the idea of a budget. Sometimes I'll write something and I'll be like, I will be torn between putting the cart in front of the horse and being like, oh, but is this realistic for either me to do? Or like, if I was going to try to shop it around, am I better off trying to keep it like a realistic budget or whatever, like, and not put all sorts of like crazy stunts and special effects, and you know what I mean? Like it's, these kinds of questions are things that I get hung up on, and I'm just curious, like, how do you look at, do you just like write whatever you're going to write and not think about that? Or is there any sort of like practicality in writing things that are feasible to produce for whatever your end goal is?
Yeah. And like, I think this like comes down to like your personality type, like what you're able to juggle. I mean, writing and editing are two different muscles. And I think when you're like thinking about budget, you're balancing something in the back of your mind that might be holding up the writing process. You can always rewrite. You can always rewrite. And like writing is editing, like writing is rewriting. And so like one of the most helpful things that I like, advice I got, and like it's one of those ephemeral things, like what you're doing is like pouring sand into a sandbox. You're not building the castle yet. The first draft is just putting the sand in the box. You're going to reshape that sand over and over and build a castle. But that first draft, you know, just build that. And then like, then you can start asking, can I afford to film at Six Flags? Or maybe I should have like a slip and slide in a backyard. Like,
right.
You know,
yeah.
Can we have the same scene like happen there? And those sorts of questions can be, you know, scaled up and down in the editing process. I had an agent tell me like, you know, if you're up for it, like have 3 versions of your script. Like have the HBO half-hour version, have the hour-long AMC version, and have the half-hour network version. Like have, like if you want to write 3 drafts, imagine your thing 3 ways. And then like if you're looking to sell, that opens up your markets, being like, look, I have a half-hour version that's very R-rated. We've got some nudity, some F-bombs. You know, we've also got the ABC version. You know,
yeah,
right.
And so like, just you can determine that afterwards, especially if you are writing to discover stories. If you're writing in being like, I need to make something this summer, well then you need to write to your budget. Like,
yeah, That's a great thing to keep in mind too, is that there's not one way to tell your story. There's lots of ways, and I think it is a good, really valuable exercise. Whether if it's all these different versions for like the practicality of selling it, that's great. But also just putting it into different versions for the sake of like untethering yourself from like having to have it be one way, I think is a good way to like sort of surrender that control.
So huge to surrender that control. And guess what? You can rename your drafts. I have like a folder of like so many renamed drafts of like just like version, like, and like some of them are small changes, but some I've just been like retitled like Vampire _ Helen, where I've just like shifted the POV to an entirely different character and been like, what's that do to this script? Is this the character we need to be following? Like, maybe I'm wrong. And like, maybe that script is terrible. I'm like, nope. Like, I got notes on a script from a manager and I'm like, I don't agree with these notes at all. But they wanted a rewrite. And like in 2 weeks, I had to turn it around. I just was like, man, I do not like this direction. But instead of fighting the no, I was like, what do they want to see? I renamed it an entirely new thing and went a new direction. That tree branch is kind of like I've gone back to my core, but I've taken things that I used in that rewrite to be like, oh, I did discover something new taking it that direction. And so like, yeah, you can rename your draft files multiple things, and that way you can also come back. So when you're editing, it's non-destructive editing. You can be like, I'm not destroying anything. Like, this is just, it's a new script, and you can come back to the previous version. I'll use dates instead of like versions, because like that versions can get messy. Like if you're like, well, it's version 8, but with this, and like you're wanting to explore, you're wanting to take that improv freedom of being like, let's do this again, but with the same characters. And like actors who are used to devising work where you're like going on stage and like reiterating things in character. That's a lot of what we're doing with scripts here, and just give yourself that freedom and permission instead of like, this is my version. I think earlier in my writing career, I was like, this is the story. This is what it's got to be, instead of being like, maybe I'll, if it helps you to think of like, write an episode 2. I mean, like, just be like, cool, I wrote this pilot. I'm going to write an episode 2. And honestly, you'll know the characters better, and you'll probably end up with a better script because you're not tied to the plot points that you're chasing.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's awesome. A great point to end on. Luke, it's been so great talking to you. We really appreciate you joining.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This has been great.
Wow. That was a quick hour. Thank you.
Oh, man. Yeah. We could go for another hour.
Is there anything else? Obviously, we've mentioned your scripts, which those two that you mentioned, the Vampire and the Alpha and Omega, those are viewable on your website, right?
They are. I probably should update because I have new versions of them since I put them on my website. But yeah, LukeSwan.com. Like, oh man, like
beat them to it, man.
Right? Yeah. If you want to see the process, maybe I'll put a Dropbox of like every single version, and like people can tell me what I'm doing.
Cool. But is there anything else that you wanted to plug or direct people toward before we let you go?
Man, follow me on the socials. I'm Luke Zwan on basically all of them. I'm most active on Twitter and TikTok lately. Yeah,
that's dope.
Awesome, cool. Well, we will direct people to find you there. You have been watching us on the Improv Network on Facebook, which actually right at this moment, I think is the broadcast has been disrupted, but either the Improv Network on Facebook or Improv FAQ on YouTube. You can also find Improv FAQ content on the improvnetwork.org, a fantastic resource for all improvisers and theaters and festivals and beyond. You can check out the website, blogs, profiles, all that good stuff. Thanks for joining. Thanks for tuning in. Kurt, you're the best. And there he is. Well, this is for a heart for Tori. And then also a nod of approval from Kurt.
See, Luke, you got some good notes on this one. There we go.
Yeah, great feedback.
Put that in your pocket.
Good feedback. Put that. Oh man, screen cap every good positive feedback because you will need that. I have a folder. I have a
Put it in
folder
your
of like,
pocket.
put it in your pocket because you'll need it on those dark days. Be like, am I good at
I
this?
just
Find the folder. Wrote lots of jokes. Admiral number of jokes.
I want you to start an Instagram account just called Luke's Pocket and just screen grabs of
Luke's
all the
Pocket. Yes.
It might be sparse, but
okay, guys. Thanks again for a great conversation. Thanks for anyone who tuned in, and we'll catch you next time on the Improv Network podcast. Bye-bye.
Bye.